living with type 1 diabetes and you've ever felt overwhelmed by trying to figure out how to fit this chronic disease into your life, you are not alone. I'm a physician and I've lived with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years, and there are so many things that I wish I had learned sooner in my journey with type 1. Today I'm going to talk to you about 5 things that I would have loved to hear on day 1 of my diagnosis. We're going to talk through 5 tips that help with not just blood sugar management, but also how to feel good living with type 1 diabetes. If you don't know me, I'm Dr. Hannah. I am a general practitioner and a diabetes educator. I also have a background in nutritional sciences. And we're going to dive into the 5 tips. But before we get started, I want to say, if you haven't already heard about my channel, I'd love for you to subscribe. Here I share different mindset, lifestyle, and diabetes tips, really looking at how to create a life that feels good with type 1. So the first tip is that insulin isn't just about food. Often we think about our insulin to carb ratio and how to calculate insulin based on what carbs we're eating. But our insulin needs change throughout the days, weeks, months, and certainly chapters of our life. And what we see is that there are so many other things that impact our insulin needs outside of carbohydrates. Things like protein in some settings, things like the amount of sleep that we're getting, where our hormones are, how stressed we are, if we're fighting off an illness. There are so many variables in life that can impact our insulin sensitivity. It really does change our needs throughout time. And if we're just looking at the carbs we're eating and we're getting really frustrated with why our insulin needs are changing, there may be more to the story. And so that's something worth knowing. Tip number 2 is gut health. It can really change everything if you don't have great gut health. There is an impact on our blood sugar levels if we're having chronic diarrhea or loose stools, but often people don't talk about their GI function with their physicians. It's not something that comes up unless there's a direct question or a direct problem. And so what I found in my practice is that a lot of people don't understand what healthy gut function looks like. People will go years and years, decades, having 2 bowel movements a week, not realizing that's not optimal. Or they may have multiple bowel movements a day that are looser, or multiple bowel movements a week that are loose. And that's also not optimal. And those things can impact our blood sugar because they impact the way that we digest food, the rate at which we digest food. And that impacts the way that we're absorbing our carbs and how our hydration is. And all of these things are related back to blood sugar management. There's a huge correlation between things like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and irritable bowel syndrome with type 1 diabetes. It's important that we're having these conversations with our physicians so that we can keep track of whether or not that's something we might need to look at. The third tip is mindset is medicine. And mindset is so important. When I was growing up with type 1 diabetes, I got a lot of great information from my endocrinologist, from my diabetes educator, and even from my primary care doctor. They were able to help me figure out how to navigate my blood sugar control and manage my blood sugars a little bit better. But one thing that I felt stuck with on my own was figuring out how to feel about diabetes, how to talk to my friends about it, what to make it mean in my life, how to understand what I was capable of and what goals I could achieve with it, or how to understand how to take care of myself differently than my peers, and most importantly, how I felt about diabetes. I didn't know what it meant for my future, and I didn't know how to move forward in life without really feeling like I was held back or broken or like I got the short end of the stick, because every time we'd go to dinner with friends and I'd have to take insulin, it felt demeaning. Or times where I felt like I needed to wake up at 3 a.m. and treat a low blood sugar, I felt exhausted and it felt unfair. And there is a way to live with type 1 diabetes where you don't feel like you are living this life that's unfair. And it took me a little while to get there. And really, I learned from watching and learning from other people who lived with diabetes in a way where they felt empowered. They had a good relationship with their diabetes. And over time, they taught me how to feel good about it too. And so I've actually just created this course looking at diabetes and mindset and teaching people how to create a mindset that feels good around it. It's a 6-week self-paced course, and I'll have it linked below. The 4th tip is the right tools will save your sanity. I remember growing up, my pediatric endocrinologist only understood some of the diabetes technology that was available. And although I was grateful to have an insulin pump and learn about how to use it from her, I also realized that there was so much more on the market that I didn't learn through her. And I don't think we live in this world where it's the endocrinologist's job to teach us everything that's available for diabetes, but I do think it's really helpful if we go out on our own and we learn more about what's available, what's covered under our insurance, what type of technology might help us more or help us more in that chapter of life, because I think it's always changing and it's not the same for everybody. For me, a big turning point in my life with type 1 was getting a continuous glucose monitor. When I started using a CGM, really changed how I was able to sleep more confidently, not fearing lows because I knew I would wake up from the alarm, and I could do more things than I was letting myself do before. Go to a longer workout class because I felt like I had a tool to help me stretch my time between my blood sugar finger pricks apart. And it made a big difference. It also helped me to prevent the low blood sugars that I was having and the high blood sugars. And so it was really helpful. Another tool that's been hugely helpful for a lot of my patients are these insulin pumps that talk to the continuous glucose monitor, and they actually make changes in how much insulin you're getting in real time. That's so helpful for preventing lows and treating high blood sugars as soon as they happen. And there are many of them on the market now. So I really think technology and tools can be a huge piece. And if you're not into technology, understanding the tools and how to use your shots or your multi-daily injections is also a really great point. There's an awesome book I love called Sugar Surfing by Dr. Stephen Ponder that was another piece that changed the way of my diabetes care. And that's something that you could look into if technology is not something you're interested in or not covered by your insurance. The fifth tip is that you deserve to feel good with diabetes, not just in control with diabetes. There was a point in my life where I really felt like, oh, my diabetes burden, my stress around living with diabetes will get better, it may even go away if I can just get my blood sugars to be as perfect as possible all the time. And I believed that for years. And in college, I got to a point where I had micromanaged my diet so much and structured my schedule so much where my blood sugars were pretty close to perfect, and they were not in diabetic ranges, not even close to that. But I also lost connection with my friends. I was really limiting my foods that I could eat, and I lost a bunch of weight in an unhealthy way. And I felt so burdened by diabetes, even though my blood sugars weren't in diabetic levels. And the point is not that it's not great to have great levels. It's certainly a goal that is worth moving towards. But at the same time, it's important to learn how to feel good about diabetes. And taking the crazy blood sugars away doesn't necessarily mean that will happen automatically. We have to feel like we can understand how to take care of ourselves and do a great job of keeping our blood sugars in line, but also understand that we don't have to feel broken all the time, that we don't have to feel less than. And so understanding that you deserve to feel happy regardless of where your blood sugars are, high, low, in range or not, and that those two things are separate. I think that's a really huge takeaway. So I hope these tips are helpful for you. I'm excited to share them. I'm super excited about this new course coming out. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I answer every one of those personally. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, that would mean a lot to me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.